Hi, I'm Sarah Whorf. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a toothpick Baren. This was invented by a Japanese professor, Osakus, and it was documented by Nick Seminoff up on his website. And I found out about it from a posting in social media about a year ago. I started making them and changing the menu a little bit, changing the recipe a little bit, and using different materials, but basically this is based off that. I will have the link down below so you can go see Professor Nick Seminoff's write-up of how to make a toothpick Baren. The thing that's so great about these is not only is it handmade and very inexpensive to make, but it replicates the points in a traditional Japanese Baren. This is a plastic Baren, of course, but it too has the bumps that would be made by the coiled rope in a traditional Baren. In a similar way, the toothpick Baren will also give you multiple little points. This is great because it means that, like having a whole bunch of high heels put together, it's concentrating the pressure, which means that you have to exert less force to get a really good hand-printed print by using one of these Barens. I tend to use a combination of a Baren like this and a wooden spoon for printing by hand, but I also like the addition of a toothpick Baren, and because the strength that these will give you in the printing, they're really great for printing flats or solid areas in your prints. Just need some basic supplies for this. You need some sort of cutting board or a back of a pad that you can cut, a ruler, some sort of mat knife or utility knife. You could probably do this with an X-Acto, but you want a blade that's a little heavier. Some scissors, pencil, and then some 100 grit. It really doesn't matter, like whatever wood sandpaper you might have on hand, but I'm using 100 grit. And then you'll need some mat board, illustration board, or even chipboard. Again, that you could, find on the back of any pad of paper. You could use that, would work great. You need some glue. Osaku's information, he's using epoxy or something, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stick with non-toxic materials. So I found that white glue works just fine. I wouldn't bother buying neutral pH white glue or anything. What we're making here is not archival. This can be fairly expensive. I also find that I don't really like Elmer's all that much, although it works just fine. It's just a lot slower to dry. My favorite is wood glue. Works great. This is actually, I can find at the dollar store, so it's very inexpensive. It's basically white glue. I also really love Sobo. It's also white glue, but both of these set up and dry faster than Elmer's, and that's helpful, especially when you're doing the first part of the construction of this. So you need some glue. You also need right? So you could use paper towel rolls, but they're very thin, and I find what works better is a shipping tube, much better. When you use these, inevitably when you're squeezing together the toothpicks, thinner paper towel rolls or even toilet paper rolls tend to mold themselves to the toothpicks, and you can feel that. You could obviously finish this with a heavier paper around it, so you can't feel that. I've kind of decided that I'd rather just work with shipping tubes, because then you end up with this really nice finished feel to the Baren with this nice big sturdy shipping tube. Also, you could make small ones, and I really like these small little guys, especially if you were printing small little prints. It would be kind of fun to have a couple different sizes. I'm all for scrounging, so if you can order something and get a tube and then use that, or get one from a friend. I don't know if you can even find these at thrift stores and things, but if you can scrounge one up from a friend, I would totally do that. Then you need toothpicks. So the instructions really say to get bamboo, and I've made a couple Barens with the bamboo, which is really nice. I made this one, and this one is also bamboo. The bamboo, of course, is really springy and very strong. This one I made by clipping off the tops of all of them, so I get a little bit flatter tops. This has the pointed tops on it. I found that I actually prefer the wood to the bamboo toothpicks because I can sand them down easier, and yes, they're going to wear out faster, but I don't care when it can just take me a few days to make another Toothpick Baren. So what you want is you want round toothpicks. So again, I hate to promote going to a dollar store necessarily. However, you should be able to find round toothpicks at a dollar store. And that's going to be, of course, the cheapest way you can go. Target sells big things of toothpicks, and the market and everything sells toothpicks. You definitely want wood ones. You want round ones, not the flat ones. You don't want ones that have the, tra-la on the top for hors d'oeuvres. The bamboo toothpicks, if you want to try those, I had to go to kind of a better store where they had them with kind of the, a little bit higher end, definitely not at the dollar store, kind of party stuff. And that's where I was able to find the bamboo toothpicks. Other toothpicks that I really like are these Diamond L'Elegance toothpicks, and they're flat on the top. These I also am able to find at Target. And so you can see they're a little bit different. They have these flat tops on them and sort of these beveled kind of edge. What I like about these is I've made some where I've just used those. And in a way, I'm breaking down that idea of getting all the little spikes on the toothpicks, but I do like that it still has the strength of the multiple bumps on it, but I don't have to worry about this tearing the paper at all. And I also have made a bunch of these where I've used these flat, they're not really flat, they're like rounded end toothpicks around the edge, and then the pointy edge toothpicks in the center. And so I get best of both worlds that way. You're going to need a lot of toothpicks, and it's just as easy to make 2 or 3 of these at one time rather than one at a time. All right, let's talk about cost. So if you're able to scrounge a tube, or you're just going to use a paper towel tube or a toilet paper tube, then that's zero cost right there. If you do go to a dollar store and able to find the toothpicks, that's $1, and another $1 for the wood glue. And if you have some mat board, chipboard laying around, and you have all the other tools like a utility knife, then this is going to cost you $2 to make one, because it takes quite a lot of toothpicks. You, depending how the big diameter of the Toothpick Baren that you're making, this could be enough for maybe 1.5 or maybe 2 little small ones. But if you're going to make one of this kind of size, then if I'm remembering right, you really can only get one out of one of these packs. So you could be looking at, $2 a Baren. That's really great. And that's probably actually cheaper than a wooden spoon, maybe, depending on where you're buying a wooden spoon. First thing you want to think about is how big do you want to make it? What sort of diameter? So thinking about your hand size and what size of print you want to use this for. You might notice that on this, how high this comes up to these. These are toothpicks that I had cut off. How high, whereas on this, I have the tubing going much lower. The tube really needs to go only about a little more than halfway, 2/3 maybe. So you've got quite a lot of choice about how high you want that to be. What I found is sort of the sweet spot, because the first thing we're going to do is cut the tube, is that I like them to be around 2 inches. And that seems to be a really nice, 1 7/8, something like that. I think most of mine are right around, 1 7/8. This one's 1 3/4. And this one that's quite low, this one, the tube is 1.5. And of course, if you take the toothpicks and look at them and set them on here, you can see if you did 2 inches, how much of the toothpick would show. I'm going to prep. I guess I'll use this. I keep reaching for different things. Oh, I already have this measured on here. Let's see, it must be this way. Yeah. So what I do is I just take my ruler, figure out my height. This one is 2 inches. And I just go like this and put, pencil marks all the way around, and that's going to guide me in the cutting. You could use a hacksaw or something for this if you want. I found that actually using the utility knife, I can be more accurate than using the hacksaw. The hacksaw tends to want to rip these tubes up. Maybe I didn't have a sharp blade on the hacksaw, I'm not sure. And all I do is just kind of set my blade and try to keep it close to that mark, and I just rotate it around. We're going to sand this, so if you make a mistake or you realize it's really lopsided, it's not going to be a problem. And this I got a lot better at after I did about 30. So you'll get better at it. Just take your time. This one I can make a nice little short Baren out of, which might be fun. Okay. You might want to set this down and just check how flat it is. And if you need to, if it's really uneven, you might want to just quickly just sand it so it'll set really flat. If you find that the layers of this are coming unraveling, it tends to happen more with, say, the paper towel rolls, that this starts to, right, come unglued. And so you might need to glue that back up. So I would take care of that now. Next step is I want to cut a base. So I don't even measure. I just kind of do this. This is going to be trimmed later. So it doesn't have to be measured, or it doesn't have to be perfectly square or anything like that. And this is the first step. We're going to glue this to here. Now, if you're using mat board, you might have a color on one side. So you might want to glue it like this so that in your finished Baren, you'll have a color on the bottom, which is kind of nice. Okay, so what I've learned about with gluing is that you don't want too much, you want just enough. I don't want a whole lot of glue in the inside because I want a nice flat surface for my toothpicks to go in later. And I don't want a whole bunch on the outside because I want to end up with a very nice trimmed and sanded edge at the end. What I do is I just put a little bit of glue right on the tube. I'm just going to set it on here. And then I take another little piece of mat board, and if I notice that there's a whole bunch of glue in there, I'll go in and kind of wipe it away, use a Q-tip or something. Because these are beveled on both sides, right, the bottom of this is not going to be hitting right up against the bottom of the inside of the tube. So you have a little leeway there, but you definitely don't want a big glob there. But I do go around and I just get rid of this extra. And I'm also kind of pushing it underneath too. That's the first step for this. And what I do is I put a couple books on top of it. And then I have to wait at least 24 hours for this to dry completely. If you're going to use a paper towel roll instead of a mailing tube, it's much thinner. So sometimes what I do is I just flatten it and measure whatever you decide your measurement's going to be. Remember, again, I do somewhere between 1.5 and 2 inches. And then I just flatten it and cut it like this. First of all, that's easy, right? Second, though, it does tend to unravel a little bit. No big deal. I'm going to glue that back together. The other thing is, of course, now I have these 2 bends in it where I've folded it. And it is important that you get this back to a circle and before you glue it onto a base, right? But it is harder to keep that circle when you've folded it. You could do what I did with the packing tube. Be sure you have a really sharp blade and just cut it in the same manner, but try not to squish it. Okay. These are all completely dry. It's time to put the toothpicks in, but first it's really important that you check by looking inside and make sure that the total perimeter is sealed completely. When I look in this one, which is my paper towel roll one, I can see light here. So I need to put some glue, more glue here, and then wait again another 24 hours for that. These other ones are looking, this one I can see some light. So just really be sure that you check this. I wasn't prepared to do this first time, and I had so many blowouts with the glue, and it's not fun. Okay, these are good to go. I already went through my toothpicks and made sure there weren't any that were split or splintering, and sometimes you get one that's really bent, so I pulled those out. There's a lot of right amounts of glue to put in here. There's no real right or wrong. You want to put enough so that you're covering the bottom of the toothpicks, obviously, to get them held in there. But if you put too much, it's all going to come oozing out the top once you get the toothpicks in there. And I don't know that I do the same amount every single time, but I can tell you that this time I filled it to about here. So maybe it's 3/4 of an inch of glue in the bottom. Now I just start putting the toothpicks in. Find that it's easy to do them as groups like this. There's no real hurry here because, I mean, of course you don't want to sit for 20 minutes watching me do this, but there's no real hurry here because this glue is going to take a long time to dry. So as I'm putting these in, I'm just making sure there's not any toothpicks that's really low. Sometimes there's real short ones, and I would take that out. Or if there's one that's sort of splintered and I missed it earlier. Once I get about this many in, then I start to make a really nice even edge and make sure they're all lining up with no gaps in them. These Toothpick Barens, even if you do one that's sort of lopsided or you don't get these all in as straight and perfectly as you like, it's still going to work just fine. Once I get to about here, I'm just going to keep, see how they're all lined up nice and evenly there? I'm going to try to keep doing that and then fill in the gap on this edge towards me. Now, if you can see, but I've already used way more than half of this box already. I'm getting to the point now where I'm going to start to fill in spaces where there's a hole, and it's pretty easy to see where there's a space. And you just keep slotting them in. I'm also going to be looking at the outside here, making sure that these are also even. might get to a point where it's hard to put them in. I just use my scissors to bang them in there. All right, pretty much have as many toothpicks as I want to put in there. Any more and it's going to start to distort the circle. So I'm just going to kind of finesse it a little bit, make it be a nice shape. Actually, I see a space right here. Now's the time to check to make sure you don't have a really low toothpick or something's not standing straight up and it looks a little weird. You know, just kind of look over everything again. It's just that easy. Now this has to sit for another 2 days at least before I move on to the finishing. But we don't have to do that today because I have ones that have already been done and been sitting for quite a while. So once they're completely dry, you're going to trim off the excess base here, and you can just use scissors for this. You get the idea. Just keep going around and around until you get it down as close to that base as possible. Once you've trimmed this all the way down, you can then sand it. Get it nice and even with the tube there, so you have this nice seamless connection. Sometimes I find that when I've cut it off, I still have sort of holes there and I need to put a little glue in there. So just do any of the finessing that you might want to do to make this nice and finished. Oops. Usually doesn't take very much. Like I'm pretty close to having this nice and smooth. Once you've sanded the base and made it all smooth, the only last thing I do is I usually sand the tops of the toothpicks a little bit, and just like that. Sometimes sanding around the edge just to make a slight sort of bevel, just so that it wouldn't get hung up on my printmaking paper. Also, if you've made a Baren using 2 different types or brands of toothpicks, they could be different heights, and so I would sand them to get them more consistent. After that, it's just deciding whether you want to decorate your Baren, and you could, of course, paint the base, do all sorts of things if you want. I have just glued bits of prints around them to make the base, and that's all I've done. You could, of course, seal these with acrylic varnish or something if you want to, but I like the idea that these would wear out and might even look better by my using the tool. I hope you found this informative. I hope you'll give it a try and make a Baren for yourself, and I hope you have many years of happy printing with your Toothpick Baren.